Um, I thought we would basically just have a fun day today. Um, so I am going to play um, a piano arrangement of a Strauss waltz by the waltz king Johann Strauss. Um, Strauss's years are basically 1825 to 1900, but I don't think he quite cut that long. Okay, I almost was right. 1825 to 1899. And he, his father was also a composer. His brother was also a composer. But this is Johann Strauss Jr., who is known as the Waltz King. He wrote a whole bunch of really famous waltzes: the Blue Danube, Roses from the South. What else? Anyway, a whole bunch of waltzes and polkas and a couple of operettas. And I am going to play, it's called The Sweetheart Waltz, and it's from his operetta, The Gypsy Baron. All waltzes are the same. They start with an introduction, which is where everybody in the ballroom processes, and the women show off their gowns and the men show off their tuxes. They all start with a slow intro. And this one is. And that leads to a series of waltzes. We all think of waltzes as one piece, but they're made up of a series of waltzes. For instance, in this waltz, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 completely separate waltzes. They're all in different keys. The first one is. In the key of C. The second one, which there's no transition, it just ends. The second one begins. In the key of G. And so forth. The third one is in E flat, which isn't very close to the key of G, and they all start with these little intros. And I guess, depending on the age and fitness of the crowd, you could take a breather between each one, because these were meant to be danced. Strauss had his orchestra, and they did, I've forgotten how many nights a week, people paid money to come and waltz. People do that today, only they do things besides waltzes, jitterbugs and tangos and all sorts of other things. But in the 1860s in Vienna, it was the waltz. So this is the Sweetheart Waltz from the Gypsy Baron. Ooh, I should say, because I should give him credit, that it says that these were collected by a man named Alexander Sheely. I am assuming that that also means that Mr. Sheely arranged them for piano. 1972. So this is one of those series by I can't find who publishes them, but Ocopa Publishing Company. They do a whole bunch of stuff: Chopin, Brahms, mostly student stuff. So back to the top, and let me check if my picture's okay. Yes, okay. So once more, I had to give credit to Mr. Sheely. So these were originally for orchestra. He arranged them for piano. second, I'm going to play a couple of rags. I'm going to do Tom Turpin's Harlem Rag. Turpin's Harlem Rag was the first rag that was published. He lived from 1871 to 1922. He was almost a contemporary of Joplin. Joplin was born, Tom Turpin was born in 1871 and Joplin was born in 1879. So they're 8 years apart. They're almost contemporaries. Tom Turpin was from Harlem, spent his entire life in New York City, taught there, performed there. He was, you know, he missed out on the big jazz age stuff because he was too old and he died just a hair too soon. But he had a very successful career in New York, in Harlem. And I'm assuming that when Joplin moved to New York City in the early 20th century, around 1910, he must have known Tom Turpin. They were both African American, and Harlem Rag beat out Maple Leaf by 2 years. Harlem Rag was published in 1897, and Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag, which was his first rag, was published in 1899. So Turpin beat him out by 2 years. I have said already that I don't think Turpin's as good a composer as Scott Joplin, but I'll let you decide for yourselves. This is the Harlem Rag, a two-step. So I don't know what a two-step dance is, but all of this stuff is meant to be danced. I'm going to pair that with a Joplin rag. This is called Sunflower Slow Drag. It's a ragtime two-step. And I have to say, there's lots of octaves and chords. I do think it's sort of like this great big sunflower that's, is the hugest sunflower you can imagine. Just seems to me it's like a sunflower. It's big. It's nothing subtle about it. It just sounds like a sunflower to me. And it reminds me in some ways of Sousa. It's got that same sort of, I think it would sound great arranged for a band. I just think this would be great in a band arrangement. You can just hear a band playing that. Anyway, rags are very much like waltzes in that they are comprised of sections. You have the opening section, and then that ends. And then you have a second section. And in this case, the first section returns, and then you go on to a third section. Opening two sections are in B flat. Third section is in E flat. Anyway, I picked this one because it's a pretty typical Joplin rag. It isn't, his most inspired writing. It isn't his worst writing. So I'm trying to give Tom Turpin an even break here. So this is Sunflower Slow Drag, a ragtime two-step. And finally, all these influences crossed over into Europe, and European composers were fascinated with American music and Afro-American music and jazz and stuff. And this is a piece of Debussy. I must admit, I can never get my students to play it because it has a horrible little name. It's called Le Petit Negre, which they translate as the little Negro. And it's so hideously politically incorrect that all of my kids that I used to teach, it's a great piece for students to play, but I could never get them to play it because it's such a hideous title. And it is in imitation through a very Debussy lens of Afro-American music, jazz, and ragtime. It's still very Debussy, but you can hear the ragtime influence and the beginnings of jazz. Piece was written, as far as I know, in 1917 or 16. It was copyrighted by Debussy's publisher Leduc in 34, but Debussy was long dead by 34. So he wrote it around 1916 or 1917, which was towards the end of his life. So, Le Petit Negre.